Users are the person who is going to define his or her own function is called user-defined function. Whenever I want to repeat same lines again and again, in that situation, I can able to use user-defined functions. If the function returns any value to the calling function, then I want to specify the return type. Hello to all, a warm welcome to my new session on user-defined function. I'm Revati, faculty, Department of Computer Science, Vidhyaashram Pre-University College, Temple of Excellence, Mysuru. In my today's session, I'm going to deal with new chapter, and the name of the chapter is user-defined function. And now let's see the marks allocated for this chapter. So here we can able to expect one 1-mark question and one 5-mark question. So here we can able to score total 6 marks very easily under this chapter. One is 1-mark question and one 5-mark question. Total 6 marks we can able to attend in this chapter. So dear student, in my today's session, at the beginning, I'm going to start with the definition. That is, what is user-defined function. Along with that, I'm going to deal with the advantages of user-defined function and functions definition or structure of function. That means how I can able to write the user-defined functions in my program. What is the structure I need to follow while writing user-defined program. Along with that, I'm going to deal with calling a function and main function and how to returning a values along with that function prototype. So dear student, these are the very important topic, and I'm going to deal these topics in my today's session. So at the beginning, I'm going to have the definition. So as the name itself indicates that users are the person who is going to define his or her own function is called user-defined function. For example, think that I'm the user. Now I want to define my own function. For that, in C++ programming language, we are going to have the user-defined function concept. So, user-defined function is a function. So, this user-defined function is once again a group of statement, and it is designed and developed to perform specific task based on the user needs. These user-defined functions are returned. So here user-defined function is a function defined by the user to solve her or his problem. For example, think that I want to create a basic calculator. If I want to create basic calculator, what are the options I need to provide here? That is nothing but addition, subtraction, division, multiplication as well as modulus. Now tell me, dear student, how can I write my own function here? For each operation, what I will do, I'm going to write a small program, and I'm going to compile that program and I'm going to test this program. So each programs are treated as individual module or individual program. So the user-defined functions are also called subprogram or subfunction or submodule. Such a function can be called from anywhere and any number of times. So here, if I write user-defined function, that can be called anywhere in the program and n number of times. So calling a program or calling a function that is purely depends on the user. So here user can able to call that function n number of times. The purpose of using a function is to make the program design easy. So why I required user defined function? To make the programming process easy, simple and understandable, and thereby avoiding ambiguity. Suppose if I want to avoid ambiguity, then we can able to use user defined functions in my program. So what is user defined function? These functions are defined by the user to solve her or his problem based on the user need. She or he is going to write the program, and that kind of programs are called user defined function. Moving further, I'm going to have the advantages of user defined function. So what is my first advantage here? If there is a set of statement to be repeated, that means there are certain situation I want to repeat same statement or same lines again and again. Instead of writing same line again and again, what I can able to do here? I can able to create separate function for that code, and I can able to call that codes in my program. So it reduces the length of the program. For example, think that I'm having certain statement. So here I'm going to use same statement again and again. Now see, the length of the program is going to increase, and this program becomes complex, and it may generate ambiguity. In order to avoid ambiguity and in order to reduce the length of the program, I can able to use the user defined functions in my program. So whenever I want to repeat same lines again and again, in that situation I can able to use user defined functions. If a task is needed in more than one program or group of programmers, a function can be developed. That means if the same code is used by more than one program or more than one programmer, in that situation I can able to write the user defined functions. That means I'm going to create the function, and whenever and wherever I required those lines, I'm going to call the function. Programs can be modularized. So here C++ programming language supports modularization. So what is modularization? That is nothing but the large and complex problems are divided into smaller tasks or smaller programs, and it is called module or modularization. So here C++ programming language supports modularization into functions. So divide the complex task into smaller tasks, write the code for individual tasks, then compile, test and debug. Now that is treated as my function, and each function can be developed independently. So each module or each tasks are developed, that is coded independently, debugged and tested. For example, think that I'm going to have the complex problem. So what I will do, I'm going to divide this problem into 3 subprogram or 3 function. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to develop the code individually. So for each module, I'm going to write the code. After that, I'm going to compile and I'm going to test. For each module, I'm going to write the code independently and I'm going to debug the function as well as I'm going to test the function. Moving further, if a program is divided into subprogram, a team of program can be performed to solve each subprogram. Dear student, just think the situation that if I tell you to write the assignment 10 times, then what's going to happen? You may feel difficulty and you may get irritated and frustrated. And it is very difficult to write the assignment 10 times. And if I tell 10 members to write same assignment one time, then it is nothing but the teamwork. There is nothing but the dividing the work between each and individual student. Similarly, if I consider user-defined function, in user-defined function, we are going to divide the problems into smaller functions. And we are going to assign these functions to individual developer, and individual developers are going to write the code for individual function. So if a problem is divided into number of modules, then a team of users or a team of programmers can able to solve each and individual sub-programs or sub-problems rather than solving by a single person. And the last advantage here is, if functions are developed in a program, the number of lines are decreased. So if I'm going to write the programs in the form of user-defined functions, then I can able to reduce the code, or I can able to reduce the number of code. So these are the some of the advantages of user-defined function. And from the examination point of view, this is very important topic. Moving further, I'm going to have function definition or structure of user-defined function. Till now, we were discussing about what is user-defined function. So, user-defined functions are nothing but the small program used to perform specific task. Now, I need to write my own user-defined function. To write my own user-defined function, I need to follow certain rules as well as structure. So, at the beginning, I'm going to have the return type specifier. So, what is my first field here? That is nothing but the return type specifier. Then, I'm going to have the function name. Then, I'm going to have the argument list with declaration. After that, I'm going to have the local variable declaration as well as executable statement as well as return type. Now, this return type specifier, function name as well as argument list declaration together called function header. So, what is function header here? Here, function header is going to include return type specifier, the function name along with argument list and declaration. Then what about body of the function? So the body of the function is going to include local variable declaration as well as executable statement as well as return type. Now tell me, dear student, if I want to declare function, what are the things I want to remember here? I want to remember function header along with that body of the function. So what my function header is going to include, that is nothing but return type, function name as well as argument. Then what about my body of the function is going to include, that is nothing but local variable declaration as well as number of statements as well as the return type. Now, the function definition or structure of the user defined functions are explained in detail. So, at the beginning, I am going to have the return type specifier. So, at the beginning, I am going to have the return type specifier. So, what is this return type specifier? That is nothing but the data type. That means if the function is going to return any value to the calling function, then it is specified in terms of return type specifier. So, is the data type of the value return. If the function returns any value to the calling function, then I want to specify the return type. For example, if my function is going to return integer value to the calling function, then what is my return type? Int. If my function does not return any values to the calling function, then what is the return type? I am going to specify it as void. If my function is going to return some floating point values to the calling function, then what is the return type specifier? It is float. So based on the return value, we are going to write the return type specifier. Now, function name. So what is function name? It is user defined function name. That means user can able to write their own user defined function name, and while writing user defined function name, they have to follow some of the rules, which is same as identifier declaration rules. That means while defining identifier, what are the rules I need to follow? The same rules are followed while writing function name. Now, dear student, we came to know the return type as well as the function name. And if I consider this example, int is my return type and my function name is add, and open the curly brace, and if I'm having any argument, then I'm going to specify the argument in between my parenthesis. And if I don't have any argument, then directly I'm going to write opening and closing parenthesis. So this parenthesis indicates that argument list. So here the function may have parameters or may not be. If the function does not have any parameters, then I'm going to write open and closing parenthesis. If the function is going to receive any parameter or argument, in that situation I want to specify the parameter list. And this parameter list or argument list fields are optional. That means I can able to include the argument or I cannot be. So argument list with declaration is the list of arguments or parameters or variables with their declaration. So the best example here is int. So int is my return type. There is nothing but the data type. This is the user defined function name along with that opening and closing parenthesis. Moving further, I'm going to have the complete line is called function header. So this complete line is called function header. So what are the things? Function header is going to include return type, function name as well as argument list. Now local variable declaration. So the variables which is declared within the functions are called local variable declaration, and the scope of the variables are within that function. And executable statement. So here executable statements are nothing but the statement that is used to perform necessary operations, and the scope of the executable statement once again within the function. Now local declaration and executable statements together called body of the function. For example, int as the return type, now add as the function, and it does not receive any value. At the beginning I'm going to have the curly brace, and here I'm going to write int a equal to 10 comma b equal to 20, and these are nothing but my local variable, and I'm going to perform addition operation, that is sum equal to a plus b. Now see out sum, now print the sum, then return 0 or return sum, and close this one. So this int add opening and closing parenthesis are called function header, and the lines which is present inside the functions are called body of the function. This is the way I can able to write my own functions in my program. Now let me to write the syntax as well as the example for user defined function. So according to the syntax, at the beginning I'm going to have the data type specifier. Then I'm going to have the user defined function name. User defined function name. Then I'm going to have the argument list. Dear student, remember one thing, that no need to place the semicolon at the end of this statement. Now I'm going to have the local variable. Then I'm going to have the set of statements, then return type or return value. So this is all about structure. Now I'm going to write the example for this structure. So here think that I won't return any values to the function. So I'll write void. Now multiplication is my function name, and it's going to receive two variables. Now int x equal to a, y equal to b, then int multiplication equal to x into y, then display or print multiplication. So this is the example for function. So here function declaration includes function prototype as well as the number of statements, that is nothing but the body of the function. Now tell me how the compiler is going to identify which function belongs to which function call. So here compiler is going to check the return type first, and if it is matched, then it's going to check the function name. And if that is also matched, then it's going to check the parameter list. Now the responsibility of the compiler is to identify the function name which belongs to particular function. Moving further, I'm going to have calling a function. Now I want to call my function, where I'm going to call in my main program. So the definition of the program can come either before the main function or after the main function. So dear student, just remember one thing, that I can able to write the function definition in two ways. One is, at the beginning I can able to write the function definition, and I can able to write main program. So function definition and my main program. In this situation, I does not want to specify the function prototype, because at the beginning itself the compiler is going to encounter function definition. And another situation is that I can able to write the function definition below the main program, where I'm going to write below the main program. In that situation, I want to specify the function prototype at the beginning of the program. So I can able to write function prototype above the main program, or the first line in my main program. So this is the way I can able to write the function prototypes in my program. So the definition of the program can come either before the main function or after the main function. Now calling function is function that transfers control from one function to another function. So what is calling a function? Suppose if I want to transfer the control from one function to another, in that time I'm going to call a function. Still now we discussed how to write add function and how to write multiplication function. For example, think that I'm going to call add function in my main program, and when the compiler encounters this function, the control directly transferred to called function. So this is called calling function and this is called called function. So where I'm going to call the function is called calling function, and the control transferred to the function is called called function. Called function is the function that receives the call as well as argument. So calling function is nothing but where I'm going to call the function. While calling, I can able to pass the arguments. Then what about called function? That is the function which is going to receive the parameters, and it is called called function. Function call is the statement that is used to call or make another program to execute. So here, if I want to execute add function in my program, I want to call that function. So here I'm going to call this add function, and when I call this add function, the control is directly transferred to called function. This is the way I can able to use a calling a function in my program. So this is the general syntax I'm going to have here. So here, when a function call is made, the control jumps to calling function into called function. That means when I call function name in my program, the control jumps to calling function to called function. The general form of function here, I'm going to have the function name and I'm going to specify the argument list and I'm going to assign that value to variable. Why I'm going to assign the value to variable here? Because some function may returns the value to the calling function. In that time, to hold the return value, I required some variable. For that reason, I'm going to write the variable. For example, say int y equal to multiplication, then I'll pass 10 comma 20. So after performing multiplication operation, the called function, that is mul, going to return 20 into 10, it is 200 and it is hold by the variable y. Now this is another type. So here I'm going to have the function name, that is add, but here I won't pass any arguments. So it is empty parenthesis, but it's going to return the value and I'm going to store that value in some other variable called a. So here I can able to pass the argument, or without argument I can able to call the function in my program. So this is the example here. So here biggest is my function name and I'm going to pass 3 arguments, that is a, b and c. And whatever the return value I'm going to get from the biggest function, I'm going to store that value in my big variable. Moving further, I'm going to have the main function. So dear student, just remember one thing, that each programming language is going to have only one main function and the actual execution of the program is going to start from our main function or our main program. So to indicate that it is function, I'm going to have opening and closing parenthesis, and this main function is also going to have the return type. If the main function does not return any values, then it is specified by using void main. Now think that if the main function is going to return some values, then in that situation, int main. So if the main function is not returning a value, then the data type is void. Okay, so if the main program does not return value, then it is void. If the main program is going to return some value, then it is integer. So here I'm going to have the general structure or general form of main program. So here this main function is going to return some values. For that reason, the return type here is integer. So I'm going to have set of statement. Here I'm going to return the value 0 to the operating system. So here 0 indicates that all the executions are carried out normally. So it is going to terminate normally. Now here I'm going to have void main. So this main function is used to indicate that it does not return any values to the operating system. So it is void. Now return a value. So what is return a value? When a function is called, the statement in the called function is executed. So see here in my program, somewhere I'm going to call the function. The function name here is add. Okay, when the compiler encounters this function call, the control transfer to called function. So the control is transferred to called function. So when a function is called, the statements in the called function is executed. So when I call add function, the control transferred to add function and the statement which is present inside this function is going to get executed. After executing the statement, the function returns value to the calling function. That means after executing all the statements inside the add function, it's going to return the value, and the returned value is accepted by the calling function. So after executing this statement, the function returns value to the calling function. The return statement is used to return the value. For example, after finding sum, suppose if I want to return the sum to the calling function, here I need to specify the data type. For example, int, float, etc. A function can be return only one value or no value. So here function can able to return only one value because we can able to specify only one return type or no value. If it is no value, then I need to write void. So this is the general form. Suppose if the function is going to return a value, then return and specify the value. Another situation that if the function does not return any value, then no need to write the return statement. So this is the way I can able to return a value. Now I'm going to have function prototype. So a function prototype is a declaration of the function. So what is function prototype here? That is nothing but the declaration of the function, and it tells the programmer about the type of the value returned by the function and number and type of arguments. So here function prototype is nothing but the declaration of the function, and it tells the program about the number of values returned by the function and number of type of arguments. So here, for example, think that if I write int add int a comma int b, then this is called function prototype. Now this tells the compiler about the return type of the function and the function name along with the argument list. And if I'm going to write the function below the main program, in that situation, I need to write the function prototypes in my program. So the general form here is, at the beginning, I'm going to have the return type specifier, then user defined function name along with that argument list, or return type specifier function name and argument list, and I need to place the semicolon at the end to indicate that this is the function prototype. Now this tells the compiler that when this function is used, what is the function name, what is the return type and number of arguments used by this function. So here int is the data type, biggest is the function name, and these are the arguments. So here it's going to hold three arguments x, y and z. Another way here is int biggest, then int, this is the data type, no need to specify the variable name. So A user-defined function includes three sections. One is function prototype, function call, as well as function definition. So dear student, from the examination point of view, what is user defined function and the sections comes under user defined functions are very important. Remember, one thing here is that if I want to write user defined function, then I must write function prototype. Along with that, I want to write the calling function. That means how to make a call to the particular function and definition of that function. So dear student, in my today's session, you got more information about user defined functions. Let's meet in the next session with some more information about user defined function. Until that, keep watching and keep learning. Thank you.